Okay, thank you everybody for coming and attending this talk. I call it Workforce Development using the NICE framework. This talk has multiple audiences. I want to give people some hope with regards to both finding work and both to finding people for work, but mostly for people that are in love with security and can't find a way to work in the role that would really make them happy. To paraphrase the abstract, I truly believe that this work can bring you joy, and I want to see everybody doing it. So this is part of what I like to do in my free time, right? I'll help people with resumes, right? That's how this all got started, like going way back when, getting on, say, Slack or talking to people saying, hey, send me your resume and I'll take a look at it and we'll walk through it together and see if we come up with some improvements. And then that sort of evolved into, I've run some online resume review workshops, right? That was one of the first things I did, is invited some people. We all got together on Zoom. People were willing to put their resume up in front of other people, and we just sort of talked through it together, saying, hey, should you try this or you should try that? And then I invited some recruiters along and some hiring managers to give some input and feedback and say, here are some of the things I look for in a resume, right? Not so much don't do this or don't do that, but have them relay their experience of things that really resonated with them. And as hiring managers, that's some really solid advice. And then that grew into doing mock interview and resume review workshops. There's a open source project called the Mock Interview and Resume Review Workshop. Anybody can pull that down, take the materials, and it's a really good jump start on running that workshop. So I did that at B-Sides Nashville, and I also volunteered to do that at DerbyCon. Hacks for Pancakes and Mrs. Bat will be, I think, like the primary authors of that project. It's supported, right? They are always, every time they run one, they'll feed back into a little bit whatever they learn. It's definitely a wonderful project, so I got involved doing that. And then I started really getting interested in how to solve the problems, the things that are causing people pain. Right? There's a lot of like stress and anxiety around this whole realm of what we're doing, like our work. Getting a job or even filling a position is really stressful. And so I started talking with recruiters, and I'm like, okay, what are the things you see, and what do you think is causing that? What causes these problems? And that's what I started doing, right? When I would go to a conference, I would go around to the vendors and take their stuff, and I would ask them questions, and I'd be like, yeah, I'm sure your product is wonderful, but I'm not really interested in buying that. What I want to hear is about your hiring practices, right? So I'm like, hey, you work there. What was it like getting hired? Do you ever hire anybody? How big is your team? What are you doing? Like, I had one experience with a company that built a cyber range. So instead of going up to them and saying, like, hey, I want to buy your cyber range, or how do you get engaged or get access to your cyber range, I'm like, does anybody ever use your cyber range to test prospective employees and measure how good they are at something? And I actually had to like repeat myself 3 or 4 times before they got what I was getting at. And then they're like, no one would ever do that because it's too expensive, right? So, but that's kind of what I've been doing, right? I would talk to the guy from Secure Ideas, Kevin Johnson. He actually is really active and involved with mentoring. His company gives training at all different kinds of levels, some of which are like extremely affordable. Right, and I talked to him about some of these projects. I'd walk up to their tables at booths, and that's how I got started, and I just kept asking questions. So right now, I'm in the middle of a survey. Anyone can go take it. If you find me on Twitter, it's pinned to the top of my account. You can go take a survey. It's a multi-part thing. The first part is, what was it like getting hired? And what is it like where you work? The second part is for hiring managers. All right, tell me a little bit about the process you go through to hire people, right? So these are a sample of questions I'm asking people who are going through the looking and hiring process. One of the things I was being told is that training isn't done consistently, and when it happens, it's really done without a plan, right? So I said I would go and I would talk to a recruiter, or I talk to someone at a table, and that was a common thread. So I built some of my questions to try to pull out the root causes of that. I was being told about people getting into the interview process and finding the job to be completely different than what they expected. Right, or even get into the interview process, have everything go really well, and that was the last I heard of it forever. Right, no matter how hard they try to get back in touch with those people. So I started building questions to try to get at the root causes of those things, that survey is ongoing, and I do have some lessons learned already that I'll get to in the next slides here. So these are some of the questions that I asked people who are doing hiring, and you're welcome to take that survey. Share it with your friends. If you don't like it, share it with your enemies. But I want to get more and more information and try to get at some of these root causes, right? And that's really who I am or what I'm interested in, right? There are certain things that make people feel really helpless, right? So getting hired is so important, right? It's something we stress about a lot, and it really hurts me to see people go through that suffering, right? I started doing resume reviews, and I'd get to know people and have those conversations with them, and then hear that they sent it out 40 times and didn't get any callbacks. And when I do resume reviews, if it's not an area of work that I'm familiar with, I'll go pair them with somebody who's been through that process and hired and try to get them someone to look over their resume and get it improved, and they still nothing. So that really hurts. And I think there are a lot of systematic root causes that we're not really sure of yet. One that I like to point out, and I like this one too because it's from the other side of the table. Think about this. So even the person that's doing the hiring, it's usually just one person. And even if they're not signing the check, they have to go to their boss and say, this is the one. I really like this person. Now think about how stressful that is from that side of the table, right? How much would it hurt your career if HR takes what you said was a great job description and they add things to it, like 7 years experience. I pick 7, it could be 12, who knows, right? 7 years experience, he needs to have this piece of technology and whatever, a college degree, right? Those are all things you must have. They weren't on your original job description, but they get added. Now the person comes in, they're a great fit, and they don't have any of those things. If I like them, I have to go to my boss and say, even though they don't meet the requirements, I want to hire them. Please pay them money to come here and work. If that doesn't work out, my credibility is done, right? I can maybe fight that system a little bit, but if I do and I lose, I'm done, right? And so it's a really stressful thing from both sides of the table. It shouldn't be that way. That is definitely one serious problem. And one other thing I like to point out, and the reason I like doing this talk, is I call it the Christmas rule, right? You can call it a holiday rule or any other interaction where it's really important that you do once a year, that everyone stresses about, that it affects everyone around you, but you never practice it. And it'd be really hard to practice that. But the rule applies. There are a couple things in our professional lives that really fall into that category. One of them is doing a resume and getting hired. Another one could be the yearly review, right? Those are both things that fall into that category of they affect our lives so much and we never practice. So I like to bring this up. I've been exploring the use of this tool because I really think it would help. Some of the lessons learned from my survey so far is people don't get people submit their resumes over and over again. They don't get interviews. What happens sometimes there is the person thinks they want a position. They'll put up the job description. People will feed in their resumes. They'll see what they get back, and they'll be like, oh, that's not really what I wanted. No one ever gets a call back, but people forget that the people submitting resumes, that's a little bit of hope in every single submission. And then it's gone, right? And I think that's horrible. So one thing that highlights is hiring managers and the teams that build job descriptions are kind of making it up as they go, right? Another lesson learned is the whole process is kind of like a black box, right? We like to think that if I submit my resume and it really stinks, the person that reviewed it might give me some feedback. That happens really inconsistently. And that's something I'm seeing in my research too, right? A lot of that has to do with trust. If I go on an interview and I bomb it, it's a risk for someone to give me some feedback and tell me why I didn't get a job offer, right? There are the liability questions. It can stir up some things, and people, just to avoid it, they don't give any feedback. But that makes the whole process closed, and it doesn't help anyone. Oh, this is a good one too. Having the right list of technologies on a job description and looking for people with certain kinds of technology, to me, is an indicator of, I'll put it there, the second bullet. What got you here won't get you there. Meaning, it's a throwback, right? When if I wanted to hire for IT, making sure someone had experience with my tech stack was really important, right? Because the life cycle of that stack of tech, it was more than 2 or 3 years. Maybe my depreciation is 5 even, and I try to use that longer. So when I'm hiring someone, I want to make sure they're coming in with a reasonable set of skills to do that. Someone's applying that same approach to getting information security professionals. I want you to have worked with this tech stack. And then I like my final bullet there is one of my favorites in the whole slide deck. And like a lot of times, like what does this say about the company if I'm going to make sure you have a certain experience with a certain kind of tech? For one, does that mean that the company I'm looking to go to, right, I'm reading a job description, I may want to apply for this. If I read that you must have experience with Palo Alto firewalls, is there a part of that message that says, like, are they keeping up on tech? Are they planning on advancing? Do they know what's coming next? Are they not going to train me? What happens when I get there? Technology evolves. They get rid of Palo Alto because technology or contracting of some kind, right? And then what am I going to do, right? Are they going to train me on the next thing? Maybe. And it's just interesting there. Like when I talk here about getting at the root causes, right? So I want people to take a step back and think about, like, why would you hire an information security professional? And a lot of the things in this whole realm boil down to understanding what you need in your business and then knowing how to ask for it and then get it, right? And it's not that simple. If it's simple, this would not be a problem at all. People would have no problems getting matched to the work they want. They would have no problems training and then finding work in that area. So there are problems. And I think some of it has to do with people losing focus on what they're actually trying to do and matching the need of the company to that. So, all right. So, so in some of my research, in interviewing people and some of my surveys, the problem seems to boil down to defining specifically what a role is, meaning day to day, I need a person to do these things. What are these things? And clearly defining that. Having the decisions made to say, here's who we're going to pay, the process of interviewing, and at the end there I have something I call measuring competency, which is an area I want to research a little more. And as we look at the tool, it's got this section specifically designed to build on, called extensions, right? This idea that you can define information security roles, but you still need to have this concept of you're excelling, you need help, or you're failing. Like that's still a thing like we can't get rid of. So the NICE framework and what I'm going to present here and talk about. So it's not going to solve all the problems in information security hiring, right? So for example, one of my questions I ask in my survey, it talks about cultural fit. And it doesn't matter how I phrase it or different people I talk to, it's considered in the hiring process. Your ability to work with the people there in an effective way to produce good results will always be part of the hiring process. And the NICE Cybersecurity Workforce Framework and the NIST 800-181 aren't necessarily going to help with that. There are also issues with, let's say, diversity in the workplace, diversity in information security, diversity in corporate America overall. And the framework, I don't know if it was on purpose or not, it seems to avoid that altogether. So there are certain things that are real problems in information security hiring that you're not going to get from this framework, right? Some things are real issues and concerns that are not going to be frameworked into control are still going to exist and still need to be tackled by people with good practices, good hearts, right, in some cases, and are going to have to address some of those things that way. Having an objective framework that helps you with those other things maybe can give you time to work on those other important stuff. So, like for example, here's in a situation where the recruiters I talk to, one of the main thing that really irks them is when they go to a business and say, what do you need? They get a job description. They usually end up throwing it away, sitting down with the hiring manager, working through it again, and really coming up with what a person needs. So this is a pretty serious problem. But in the end, the recruiter, what they'll do is they'll end up breaking down, okay, so day to day, what do you need this person to do? What do you need them to accomplish? All right, to do that, what do they need to know, right? Now, you're going to want them to have a certain set of skills maybe make that a reality when they come in. You'll train them for some skills, and you want them to come in with others. What are they? And you'll break this down into tasks, skills, knowledges, and abilities, which are nice framework vocabulary. So let's talk about the tool, right? So I'm going to break it down, talk about what it is and the different parts to it. So NICE, right? It's an acronym, which tells us right away, if we couldn't guess, it has roots in the U.S. government. I've had people express the idea that the NICE framework really doesn't create anything. It just labels stuff that's already there. And lexicon is an important part. And if you read the NIST 800-181, they identify lexicon as a serious underpinning cause to our hiring problems. But they do, in their definition, come right out and say, we want to create something. We want to energize and promote a robust network and an ecosystem of cybersecurity education, right? So they do have a goal, and they want to create something as much as any framework creates anything. The NIST 800-181 sort of just defines the framework. The framework itself is delivered as a spreadsheet, right? And the spreadsheet, as we know, we use spreadsheets all the time. They're awesome. It's a wonderful tool. Spreadsheets have meaning, right? The rows and the columns, the relationship to each other have meaning. And you'll notice over here on the side, this is going to zoom. There we go. All right, so you'll notice over here on the side, there are links to other part of the spreadsheet. Let's see if I can break out here and just show it real quick. I'm going to show this 2 times. Presenting a spreadsheet in a short talk is not really super effective, but I'm going to do this real quick, and then if you can go check it out too. If you have questions, anybody can ask me anytime. So they break it down into these high-level roles. Securely provision is our way to say provision stuff securely. Operate and maintain is, let's see here, oversee and govern. And they break it down into specialty area, work role, and then each of those work roles they define into what you do day to day. So privacy officer, this guy right here, if I click on the tasks, it'll give me a list of what they might expect the privacy officer to do on any given day. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Work with the general counsel. Yeah, makes sense. So if you're a privacy officer, I would expect you to be able to perform that task. And in terms of hiring, I may write that right in the job description, right? Okay, let's go back to my presentation. So that was just a quick view into what that is. It's a spreadsheet. So in the spreadsheet, you saw in the left-hand column, there was these KSAs, right? Knowledge, skills, and abilities. I mentioned the tasks. So knowledge is what it suggests. And I really like that they break this out separately. It's just the things you know related to the work, right? So for example, if you have the CISSP, you have a certain set of knowledge. Does that mean you can do the tasks? No. Does that mean you have the skills to do the tasks? No. Does that mean you have demonstrated the ability? Because if I get to the definition of ability, that's I've delivered something related to what you want. That's what ability is in this definition. Does that mean you can have the ability? No, right? It puts it right where you need it. It's a validation of a set of knowledge, right? And if you look at the framework, it'll put these things out and it'll separate. Here's what you need to know. Here's the skills you need to have. And let me just go back to this mode. Oh, there we go. Come on. There, now I have my notes. Okay, so skills is kind of like the one where what is a skill versus an ability? When does a knowledge become a skill? What is it? So this is the way they define it, right? It's taking the tools and having an impact on the security posture of the organization or an individual. And I say tools because it's first, but it also means taking a process and having an impact. And the ability to do that means you have the skill. That's how they define it. And if I come back to this, I mean, task is the piece of work combined with other tasks to compose a work configuration role. Abilities is a delivered. You have examples of deliverables, and this is how you use the NICE framework. Right, super easy. Combine these things. Look at the framework and what you're trying to produce. You want to look at human capital planning, and boom. Right. So what I put in my notes here. Take the separate parts, churn them through the framework, produce your output that you're targeting, and profit. Right. So, I mean, it's not that easy. This is the diagram in there, but they leave it open for you to apply this however you'd like. So I want to give a mention to the extensions here. They understand that in a job role, there are certain levels of effectiveness, performance, right? And they want to acknowledge that you can still work in the framework and still measure performance. It's a really great paper. and presentation from DHS. DHS took this and they layered over the top of it the idea of competency, right? And so they used this, what's built into the framework for extensions, and said, okay, we're going to talk to experts and we're going to come up with a way to have people work in these fields and know that they may not have all the knowledge, skills, and abilities right from the start, right? And we need to build up their competence, and we need to do that over time, and that's going to be a great way where we can use the framework but be practical about it. So you can go check that out. That's a really great add-on there. So if I look through that tool, if I pull up the spreadsheet and I start searching, there's certain key things that I don't find, right? I don't find this requirement for years of experience. I don't find the terminology junior, senior, right? Tech 3, Tech 4, like that's not in there. It doesn't mean anything here, which basically boils down to, and why I like this so much is, if you can complete the task and you can do it in a way that demonstrates you have the knowledge, you can use the skills, and you can produce the result, you can do the role. It doesn't matter. Now, experience does matter. We know from our own work, working in a lab, failure teaches us a lot. And if I go to a class and I follow the instructions and I get it right, I know something. Maybe even have a little bit of skill, but it isn't until I get it wrong 1,000 times do I really learn something, right? So experience matters. If you have someone who's been faced with obstacles over a long time, they're going to be able to deliver things more consistently as problems arise, right? So experience matters. So yeah, just to summarize, it's a tool. I want to get into this example here. So here's how, okay, suppose you were looking at a job description and you want to hire someone that I'm calling a web application analyst, right? So taking a real job description out there, I pulled out some things that I thought could use a little bit of work, right? We see things like this. These aren't bad responsibilities for this job, but it's also really like loose. Like you can get many different candidates with many different experiences if you throw this out there, but not really ever get what you want, right? So if I look at this first one, hands-on software development experience, you have developed applications and understand application security fundamentals. Not bad. But if I go into the NICE framework and I start looking at the software developer and what they would require from a software developer in terms of daily tasks, I can do a little better. And I listed them all and I bolded a few. Do you think maybe they meant, whoever created this job posting, that what I really want is a person who can work with analysts, engineers to do the design and obtain the information and the requirements for the interfaces of the product? Yeah, like that's a whole lot closer to something real that might actually happen in the workplace. I bolded the bottom one too. Perform secure programming and identify potential flaws in code to mitigate vulnerabilities. So the first one wasn't bad, but this one's nicer. I don't do jokes. That was as close as I'm going to get, I think. So this one here, you see it lists some languages, having a deep knowledge. The junior role reads have knowledge, and the senior role says have deep knowledge. So this is another example of a way where if we take the framework, look through that developer role and say, okay, what do they really need to know? What knowledge, skills, and abilities do they need? I listed some out here, but is it possible they really, really are looking for knowledge of application security threats and vulnerabilities and injections, race conditions, and so on? Skill in writing code in a currently supported language. I can even leave off the little parentheses, and it still has a lot of meaning. Ability to develop secure software according to deployment methodologies, tools, and practices. I'm saying the same thing. I'm using nice terminology, and I'm way more likely to get a person that I might actually hire give me their resume if I build a job description using these things. Last one. This one comes up a lot. You have to be able to communicate well, especially if you're a pen tester, right? Because if you give a report and that's your interface to the customer, and they have to like your report and they have to act on it, so they hire us again next year. And in my web application analyst position here, I have strongly written verbal communication skills. You will be reporting on methodology findings and recommendations. But if I look through the NICE terminology or the NICE roles and job descriptions, and I say I can do a little better, I bolded one, but these are all translate requirements into application elements attack surfaces, threat modeling, and defining any specific security criteria. Nowhere in there does it require that person to be able to report that verbally or any specific way, but just let them know, I'm going to want you to be able to communicate. And if I get a person who's really good at writing reports, they still sort of like pass my test, and I might hire them. I don't really ever need them to talk to anyone. Like if that's not something they can do, they have a lot of other skills that are helpful for me in my business, I don't have to make that a limiting factor that throws them out of the candidate pool. Because I need this task done, but I don't have to prescribe how it's done, right? And that's one of the nice benefits of using this framework, right? Another thing that's nice about the framework and job descriptions is it can lead to more objective rejections, which goes back to my research that says it's a black box, right? If I can be really a little more objective about what's going on, when a person comes to me and says, like, I've done this and this and this, right? First off, now I have a little bit of an avenue to sort of poke and test for a specific skill or knowledge. But when I do rejections, I can also say things like, I needed more ability, or well, A0004, and I've never seen you, when we interviewed, you never talked about actually executing anything that resembles task 02, whatever. But I can give the person feedback, I can be objective about it, and I can worry less about where that interaction is going to go. So as we, yeah, we talked about that. It's the next part I like better too anyway. Okay, so last part of this section. So I'm going to do 3 sections. I'm going to do hiring, then I'm going to talk about getting hired in career management. At the end, I'll talk a little bit of resumes. So we did a conversation about the existing job description, but what if we wanted to start from scratch, right? I'm going to build out a team, and I'm going to build my job descriptions using the nice cybersecurity framework. And here's how you do it, right? You break down the job description, start with the tasks you need the person to do, generate the list of knowledge, skills, and abilities, and build out the concept of competency later. What at the bottom here, right? To do this, you have to talk to people in the organization and really get an understanding of what the needs are. And when it's time to actually pay this person and bring them on board, right, you'll be that much further along in the buy-in. And I did it, right? So I created something called an IT security engineer. I didn't come up with the name. I just used a nice framework. At the top here, just for demonstration, I put the path, so to speak. It's the securely provisioned category. It's the system architecture role. And then it's the security architect sub-role. And I refined the list of tasks. I cut it down because I didn't want it to be a giant slide. But you could take something like this. You can go to the team and say, okay, we got to trim this back a little to something that's practical and a reasonable list. But what does a person need to know to be a security architect? The framework thinks they need knowledge of authentication, authorization, and access control methods. Everyone agree? Yes. They need knowledge of application vulnerabilities. And some people will go, so I cut that one, right? I mean, we can have a conversation. We can work from this. And then here's the rest of that, skills and abilities. Okay. All right, so moving on to the next section here. This is about working in an environment, right? So let's flip sides, the other side of the table. And some of these conversations don't just have to happen during the hiring process. They can be considered internally when you're considering a promotion or considering changing roles inside a business. So somewhere between hiring and getting hired is a lot of work, right? So these are just like little blips on our career radars in terms of time. Retaining people is very challenging. A lot of places where you might work, you have an annual review, and it's rare to find someone that can objectively show you that you're doing a good job. Like, that's a huge problem, right? I mean, if good for you if you work in a place where you have goals, yet someone that you work with checks in with you on a regular basis saying, hey, you have this goal and you're falling behind here. Here you have this goal and you're killing it. Either way, like some sort of feedback on how you're doing is too rare, right? And retaining people ends up being a game of building a relationship and challenging them to do work, right? Pushing them to get better, giving them the tools to get better, right? I want to propose that this is a tool that we can use as a self-assessment. So it would be really great if our managers and our bosses used this and did this as their job, right? So it is their job, but you need to be a vector, right? So I don't really know physics, but I'm gonna borrow and stretch one of the principles, right? My physics teacher way back then was Mr. Marley. He's gonna be really upset. So a vector is force or work in a direction. So if you think about your work and your career as a dot on a coordinate plane, and you have all of this potential energy, it's not really a vector, it's not really useful until you pick a direction, right? I mean, you have all this learning, you read blogs, you do CTF, and if you're not working towards a goal, you have all of this stuff built up in one spot, but you're not going to go anywhere, it's not going to produce any work. And if I'm going to beat this physics analogy a little bit more, right? Static friction, right? Static friction is horrible, right? We all experience that in different ways, but it's that thing that makes it hard for us to move, right? So I'm going to ask a question. So name a special role, not typically defined very well, whose job it is to break the static friction and get you moving. We've heard it a couple times throughout the day. A person in your life, maybe not your boss, but it could be your boss. So, okay, so mentor, right? That's how I'm going to define mentor in this context, right? A mentor is a person that lives between the static friction and the sliding friction, right? A mentor's job is to start you moving, right? So if you, again, picture yourself and your career as a dot on a plane with all this potential energy, once you have a direction, getting moving is really hard. And that's the way I like to characterize the really good mentors. The really good mentors are the ones that start you moving, break the static friction. If you're sliding along, that's great. They don't have to be involved. If you come to a stop again, maybe they'll help you move along again, right? So the key here, though, is you have to pick the direction. Right? Think of mentoring engagements and why they fail. Right? Can you imagine if you took a tool like the NICE framework and laid out all the knowledge, skills, and abilities and your gaps and the place you want to get to, right? Pick a role or pick a certain subset of knowledge, skills, and abilities in a role and take that to a mentor and say, can you help me get here? Now it could work, right? The person might not be the right person to push you in that direction, but if you go back to my analogy, you have mentors all around you in a circle. Right? And whichever direction you want to go, there is someone who can help break that static friction. If it's related to your job, right, that could be your boss, and your boss would be the one who can give you the push, right? But again, you have to pick a direction. So I really like this guy's book, right? He wrote a book called Extreme Ownership. It's a really great book, and in that book, it's directed towards what he calls leaders. And in this context, I want you to go first, and I want you to take the lead on this, right? So if it's working with your boss or planning a career move or starting a career at a school, I truly believe that leaders are about moments, right? So you can be a manager or not, but it doesn't necessarily make you a leader. You can be not a manager and you can be a leader, right? I think leaders are just people who act differently during certain moments, and that's it, right? And you may not feel like a leader, but there is something you can take control of in this context, which is you can be prepared, right? So if you look at the quote, right, the main difference there, the thing that makes the leader, the thing that makes the person successful, and in his context, he's coming from a special forces background, the thing that defeats the enemy is being ready to act. Right, and if you read the book, there's this major theme in the Special Forces about practice, 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 check the gear, check the gear, check the gear, do it over, do it over, do it over, introduce chaos, try it again, try it again, try it again. It's all about being prepared. So, and since I'm on this slide here and it's a little cliche, I'm going to throw in one of my favorites, right? So the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is now. So you have to go and take a look at where are you to know where you want to go. So back to this slide, right? So let's take a look at how this can be done with a nice framework. So first off, don't start with the things you don't know, right? That's an infinite list, right? Think about the circle again. All these directions, you have infinite choices of directions to go. And wherever you are, the things you know, there are infinite things around you you don't. You can't start with that, right? Imagine, again, if you imagine you're a dot and surrounded by those things, it's okay to want those things, but if you self-assessment starts there, you're going to be sad, right? You're not going to do anything, you're going to be sad, and I'm here to make things nice, right? So that's sad, don't do that. Start with the things you're good at. Things where you have accomplishments, maybe you've done something, right? Find those tasks in the roles and match them up as best you can to the framework, right? Then take the framework. The framework might not match your job title exactly. You may have a role, you may have 4 roles that you do in your work. Try to match up the ones that are most closely aligned to you there. Review the multiple roles, right? Copy out the knowledge, skills, and abilities. Now you can make a choice, right? So now you have some information and you're ready to move. You can decide, do I want to fill out this role? Because it's very unlikely that you have all the knowledge, all the skills, and all the abilities. That one's kind of nice too. If your decision is, yeah, I'm happy with this, I really like this, it brings me joy, right? You can go to your boss and say, hey, I'm doing these roles and I want to be better at this. That should be the person who can move you forward in that direction, right? That's a person you could turn to. If not, you can go searching. And here's what I mean by searching. This is a way we can use the tool. So take those lists of KSAs and search other roles for the things you already know you're strong at. Again, we're starting with what we have and understand that we may have to move in a direction that gets us new things, but our self-assessment starts with what we have. Search the other roles that you're strong with, review the task for that role, and if you're interested, take note of the gaps you have. All right, I want to move over to this type of role. I'm strong in some of these areas, but I need to fill these other ones out. Now you can go to your boss and say, hey, look, we need to do this role. Here's the things we need to know. Here's a training, right? This training teaches us these exact knowledge, skills, and abilities. Can I have the money to go? Right? That's a really good way to do it, except instead of, hey, send me to Vegas this summer. Why? Because training, because CPEs, because whatever reason, this is way more effective in filling the gaps. This is the other time I flash over to this spreadsheet. So if I go to the table of contents, I did this in advance, so this should be fine. So securely provision, right? If there was a system administrator role here, what's up? Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you. Right. All right. So under securely provision, if I scroll down, they don't call it systems administrator. They call it systems development, right? And then the systems developer has different tasks that sound and look a lot like what we would call a system admin in a lot of cases. And if I look through the list of knowledge, skills, and abilities, I may find one that I marked. Maybe. Nah, I didn't mark it. Pick one. This one I marked it. Yeah. Oh, I did. Okay, a skill. I marked a skill. All right. So, hey, skill in discerning the protection needs of information security systems and networks. Hey, I'm pretty good at that. Let's go look and see what other roles I can build off that skill and I can get better at. And I've already done this, so I know that there's other roles. Don't make me a liar, Mr. Spreadsheet. All right, I'm going to find all of them in the whole workbook. Just one quick. Oh, that's not good. Okay, I'm going to find all, not replace all. Now, so here, that particular skill comes up in other jobs. I know I'm good at it, and I want to build off of that. All right, well, first one, something called an authorizing official. Next, security control assessor. Sounds interesting. Conducts independent comprehensive assessments of the management, operational, and technical security controls. They need to know the thing I'm already good at. Let me go take a look and see what are the other skills, knowledges, and abilities I need to build out to really go and do that role effectively. I can go look at the tasks and say, yeah, that is actually something I'd be interested in. Right? This is a way where you can take control and start preparing for whatever you want to do next. Right? That's one useful thing about this tool. Right? And that's how you do it. Start with what you're strong at. and decide where you want to go. You want to get better at what you're doing, or do you want to move on to the next thing? So, oh, okay, boom. I transitioned. See what I did there? Right from that to resumes. And I did that for a reason, right? That's how it really happens in life, right? It goes from, I should update my resume to, oh my God, I just got fired. I need a resume, right? That's the way it happens in life. So the problem there too is when that happens, now you're worried. You have a resume that's old. You need to craft it into a document that's going to get you interviews. And you're worried about your bills. You're worried about your family. You just got fired. You're worried what your friends are going to think about you. You think your spouse is going to have an opinion. That's going to be going through your head. And now you have to come up with a resume that's going to get you interviews and get you another job. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Like resumeing, just like I mentioned before, it's like I said, it's okay. You don't practice doing it. Just like a lot of these other things. Remember the Christmas rule? You should, right? The nice framework makes it possible to do that. Take the tasks you're doing and the things you're accomplishing and start writing that into a document as you go so that when it is time to update your resume, you're ready. Also remember that the resume is, even if you're not changing jobs, keeping it up to date is something you can use at review time. Right? Say you do your review in January of the last year and you completed a really cool project in February. Like, what are the chances everyone's going to remember all those details? Right? So it's a really good opportunity to say, yeah, I nailed that. Right? So let's see. Two things I want to say about resumes. Actually, I'm not sure how I'm doing on time. I lost track. Hey, we're doing all right. All right. Never brag in resumes or interviews about security work you did that is right around the boundaries of legal or not legal. So it doesn't matter. So that's one. That comes up consistently in people I go and talk to, recruiters, hiring managers. They still see that. Somewhere along the way, people are not getting the message that even though it shows a particular skill, knowledge, and ability, you can't use that to get a job. All right. The other thing there is I'm going to point out just this. This one is my favorite. Verb for benefit by modifier. Right? And that's a model of how to build the bullets in your resume. That is the best. Right? And if you do verb for benefit, and benefit is numbers, you get a bonus. Right? So that's not my idea. That comes from a group called Manager Tools. It's one of my favorite podcast resources. They do this little side thing they call Career Tools, and they do a lot of interview, resume advice. Right? So verb for benefit by modifier, meaning delivered, the project, reducing vulnerability in the Windows infrastructure by 22%, by deploying Nessus, reviewing the results, and working with the team to fix the problems. That is direct, it is clear, it shows your application of knowledge, skills, and abilities, not just a list. It doesn't say I was responsible for something, but you don't really know how good I did, to, hey, you killed it, right? And then we can use the framework to build on the knowledge, skills, and abilities using the same vocabulary. The last point I want to make there, too, is if we're using the framework to build our resumes, this can be really useful for us in the interview process or the resume process, because one thing that really comes out when interviewing and talking with recruiters and hiring managers is people need to be advocates for themselves. It doesn't always come naturally to people, and you need to, it's not sell yourself, it's know how to correctly and accurately and forcefully, depending on the situation, like communicate all of the wonderful things you did. People have a hard time with that. One thing that you can get from using the framework is, I'm going to build my resume, I'm going to track how I'm progressing, I learned this, I filled out that role, I studied this, I didn't just do a home lab, I did a home lab to acquire this knowledge and skill, and it worked, right? Being objective about it helps us be better advocates for ourselves. So this is it. This is pretty much the end of the presentation, and I want to pull it all together. So throughout the presentation, I've been using chairs, right? That's just sort of a common picture. Anybody here see the pun in this one? There's a pun up there. Maybe see it? Anyone want to give it a shot, shout out, the pun? So we're talking about changing careers. Maybe those are musical chairs. Oh, I lied. I had one more joke. All right, so making a change. Remember that when you're making a change, it's not always between organizations, right? Sometimes we're making a change. It's about getting a promotion internally. Being ready is critically important. So here, let's piece this all together. Examine a job description and change it to be nice. If you find something out there, you think you want it, go through the effort. Not that you're going to throw this back in their face and say, you did a really crappy job description, here's a better one. No. But take the job description, look at what they're saying, match it up to the NIST, NICE cybersecurity framework, and break down, here's the tasks, here's the knowledge, skills, and abilities. Do I fit? Do I match? Yes, I do. Right? And you can phrase your resume in a way that emphasizes, hey, I can do the things you need. I can do the things you need, right? Show that you have those knowledge, skills, and abilities. Where you fall short, right? You're ready in an interview to say, look, I know that you need this task, and here's the things I need to learn to do that. Hey, and even before this interview kicked off, I already started the home lab on this. It's going to teach me these skills. That's an amazing, amazing, and impressive thing to say to an interviewer, right? These things can all help you be advocates for yourself. So I picked this tool because it has the potential to both help people looking for work and hiring managers, right? If you talk to people that are actually doing this, the people that are hiring are having a better and more successful time going to their management and getting funding for positions because they're more clearly defined. They're having less situations where they have to completely ghost candidates, which really hurts. Like I described resumes as like little darts of hope. And every time those things just fall onto deaf ears, it's really hurtful to me to even think that it happens, right? So, all right, are there any questions? I have some frequently asked questions. If you don't have any questions, I'll go through those. But any questions about resumes, hiring, getting hired? We got. Too many words that don't mean anything, right? So the one-page resume is okay. Here's the way I like to put it. In the past, you used to get penalized for having more than one page. It's not necessarily better to have more than one page, but you don't get penalized anymore. But here's the counterpoint to that is, people don't really read the whole thing. People mostly read the front page and the only page. And sometimes they'll skim the other stuff, but for the most part, no one has the time to read all the resumes all the way through. So one of the biggest mistakes people make is, one, a lot of meaningless adjectives, words, and fluff. Talk about responsibilities in a giant paragraph, and when you go look at it, you really don't know how well they did. There's no accomplishment. So that's one big mistake. The other one is contact information. And contact information and not being ready for the automated systems. Like, it's not as interesting and there's not a framework fix for that. But some people put their contact information in headers and it gets chopped off. Some people send in resumes with this intention of a cover letter and they get separated. So the hiring manager doesn't have the contact information. It happens a lot. The other thing is, all of these automated systems are not ready for your table and your graphic and maybe even your font. Right? So having a resume that's basically a version of it that's text only is pretty handy for those situations too. So people make those mistakes. So those are common ones. Spelling mistakes. Lying. Right? And then maybe there's different kinds of lies, right? There's the listing out a technology. Ubuntu 16.04, right? If you want to be that specific. And then when you get down to it, what did you do with it? I installed it and then uninstalled it and installed Fedora. Like, it's not a lie, because you know a little bit about Ubuntu, but it's a lie. Like, those kind of things with tech, that comes into play. And the other one is listing out technology that you did a really long time ago, right? And you haven't used it and updated. Like me, for example, I have a GCFA, right, which is SANS Forensics 508 certification, right? I don't use it, right? I did digital forensics for like a few months, and then life coincidences brought me over to another job, and I haven't done digital forensics in a while. I dropped that from my resume. I can include it. It wouldn't be a lie exactly, but it'd be a lie, because I don't keep it up, I don't do it, and it'd be disingenuous to say, hey, I'm a forensics expert. just because I took the class and did forensics for 6 months, right? That's lies. I mean, there are obvious lies, but then there's those other lies too. Other questions, other thoughts, comments, horror stories? Yeah, what do you got? I'm happy to share this with anybody. And I don't really have a clear delivery mechanism right now, but I would be happy to give it to you. So you can find me on Twitter. That's me on the first one. The second one is like a second Twitter account I use to sort of I try to find positive things in InfoSec that are happening, situations where people are mentoring other people, and just sort of give that some amplify that a little bit. But yeah, find me, send me a message, and I can get to the slides. Also, if you want to check out that survey I mentioned, it's pinned to that DP Cybuck. And then I always like to emphasize at the end of this, whenever I talk about this, let's suppose you don't need resumes, you're not hiring, and you're not looking to get hired. Check this out anyway. Like, one, everyone needs career management. But two, there are people around you who at the beginning, and I'm seeing in my research, are like victims of a process that's really broken. So even if that's not you, knowing that you can go to that person and say, hey, I know you feel kind of lost, but why don't you go check this out, pick something maybe you want to change to, and then go find a mentor to kind of get you going in that direction. Whatever. Like, take a little bit about what you learned and try to help someone with it. And hopefully it helped you a little bit to hear this. But even if it doesn't really apply directly, at least you know about this tool, you know it's out there, and use it to help somebody else maybe. But are there any other questions? Or yeah, what do you got? Okay, yeah. So no, that is not what it's about. It is about the organization needs a role filled. They classify it in certain ways, and sometimes there's a sub one. But there is no concept of intro, junior, senior. It's not a thing. You do the task, you get the job done. I don't care if you're 14 years old or 65. I don't care if you have one hand or two, right? It's disingenuous and doesn't match the real process for how we get people to do work and how we work as a team and how we get two people working together to accomplish something that four people alone would take. Like, those are real things that this doesn't address. But in terms of like level and intro, you can go after anything on here that you want. And if you read the descriptions, there is something here that sounds like CISO in the operate and govern section, oversee and govern. And if you look at the tasks, the knowledge, skills, and the abilities, they're difficult to learn, practice, and achieve, because it would take someone with the experience in both like project management and technology to combine them to fill the role of CISO. So you can read them over and say, like, that looks really cool. Let me look at something else under oversee and govern. And what do you know? The knowledge, skills, and abilities tend to overlap a little bit. I want to work my way up to CISO. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to start managing some projects. Let's do that first. Right? It's up to you to pick that path. That's also another situation where a mentor would be a big help. Right? I saw a hand over here too a little bit. Someone else have another thought, comment, concern, horror story? Yeah. Yes, that is coming out in my research. It's something I heard in conversation. It's coming out in my research. Happens way too much. I blame the resources they have available to create good job descriptions or to know what they really need. Right, so that's why I like this tool. Right, if a person in that situation said, I need these things, they can go to this tool and validate that or verify it. Then they'll have job descriptions that are way closer to what they need. And that fishing expedition of let's get 4 analysts, and then just say they start getting some resumes, and then the budget gets cut, the revenue was down, and then it's like, oh, never mind, like, forget it. Like, that'll happen less, I think. So, but you're right, it happens, and it happens a lot. Okay, so the recruiting in InfoSec has a variety of approaches, right? And not all of the recruiters act like that. Some recruiters will, right? They will. There again. Okay, so back to my root causes. What got you here won't get you there. Meaning they're applying a legacy approach to a new thing, and it's causing everyone a disservice. They're taking an approach for filling positions in jobs where there's maybe a lot of people who could do the job, so you want to keep it secret who it's for and what it includes. Or, last thing here, I guess it's got to be my last point. Some recruiters will take and they'll try to build a bank of resumes without any jobs, right? And then, one, they have you committed to them, and two, they have some ideas, I mean, they talk, of jobs that are going to come up. Company X is about to ramp up on project Y, and they're going to need some people soon, and they're going to be ready. And all those practices hurt people. I would advise not to participate or to have the correct level of expectations if you want to participate. You understand what you're getting yourself into when you work with a recruiter who works like that. But you're right, that happens, and it really ends up just hurting people. Yeah. Okay, so thank you, everybody. If you want slides, find me on Twitter. I will get you slides. If you want to talk about this, you want help with the resume, or finding a mentor, you can come find me too. So thank you very much.